talking about it. So as I look at that, what do I see? What do you guys see that we see?
Okay, I see the 2 memory slots. Yeah.
Okay. No, I said what kind of hard drive connectors. So.
All right then.
Okay. So I've got how many SATA?
2.
2. So I've got 2 SATA connectors right down here. That's all I see. And then how many PATA connectors do I see?
1.
I see 2 right here. 2 PATA connectors right there. So the first thing we're going to do, what kind of hard drives do we have? Are you unplugging stuff? No. Why do we have cables hanging out the back here?
This is already unplugged.
Okay. We'll see.
Okay.
Everybody's got what kind of a hard drive except for Mr. Harrison?
Not a solid state drive.
Do we have a PATA hard drive connecting or a SATA hard drive connecting?
PATA.
You've got a SATA.
Male.
You've got a PATA. You've got a what? SATA. You've got a PATA less class we had all, and that was the thing in the class when they were in this lab. Your computer would have been remarkably faster than Emma's computer would have been. So the first thing we're going to unplug, if you've got a PATA, we're going to unplug the PATA, and when we unplug the PATA plug, you're unplugging it from a blue spot on the motherboard. If you've got a cable in there, you can go ahead and unplug the cable and take it out because you're going to want it out of the way. So if I look at these connectors, I've got this blue one, blue PATA, and I've got this white PATA. And just so you know, the blue is always number 1 if they're colored. Okay? And if we look close at the motherboard, it probably says something like Pri IDE or something like that for primary, or it might say IDE 1, or it might say master. Okay, we'll look at them closer when we get them out. So that's the first one, and on that connector, you could have as many as 2 things. There's only 1 for all you guys, but you could have 2 on a PATA. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is do the other PATA, which goes to your CD-ROM, and everybody's got a PATA to a CD-ROM. That one's in the white connector, so go ahead and pull that one out of the motherboard. Okay, just north of that one, or just beside that connector, there's another ribbon cable. That ribbon cable is this one right here that I'm talking about. What kind of connector is that? And what is it going to?
Floppy.
Floppy.
Okay, that one's going to the floppy. Now, just so you know, and this is a test question everyone's going to get, the way to identify a floppy cable is all floppy cables have one spot. First of all, they're only 34 wires wide, but they all have a spot right here where the wire goes like that and it crosses over. That is not true. You see how those 8 wires go? Look at that on purpose. No, they did it accidentally on every single floppy cable ever made. Yes, they did it on purpose. Okay. So if I showed you this cable in a picture and said, what does this go to? The answer would be a floppy drive. It's 34 wires wide. What? Okay. So that's a floppy drive. The one right above that, this one right here, what does this go to? Emma. No, look at my finger. So you know what I'm pointing to. What does that one go to? It goes to your power supply. So go ahead and unplug that and tell me how many pins. Is this a 20 or a 24 pin plug for a power supply on this particular one? And you do have to squeeze the little squeezy thing, the power, after we did the floppy, which I didn't do.
Which I have nothing.
So
Mine is 20.
it's 20. They're all 20. But look, will this work on a 24 pin motherboard?
24 pin? No.
It won't. Emma,
Wait,
what's
wait.
over your hand? What's your hand right? Oh, look at there. It just slides right up, and we can slide it right up.
Right here.
This motherboard this power supply will work on either one. You can slide the little end on there and make it a 24 pin power supply quite easily. Yeah, look at the thing.
Oh wait, there's an extra.
That's what we were all talking about. Okay, so it's bit. They have them all bent back to get them out of the way on these, but you could definitely bring it up, and these power supplies would definitely work on a 24-pin motherboard. Okay. The other pin that's connected that you need to disconnect on this motherboard is the other power plug, which is up here. Okay. By the way, look at this. What kind of socket is this on this motherboard? It's a PGA socket. It's a PGA socket, so it's made for
Pins.
pins. Yes, but what manufacturer? What
Intel. AMD.
AMD, right? AMD. Okay.
Notes are right there.
Okay. AMD, and it says right on the cooling fan because it's a stock cooling fan that this one came with. That this is an AMD. So it's a PGA socket made for an AMD processor. Okay, so I've got everything unplugged except for a couple things. Don't unplug them,
I
please.
don't have my SATA.
Okay.
We said unplug this one.
Should I? I don't know.
Yes, we went through the SATAs, we unplugged the SATAs, we unplugged
Yeah.
the CATAs, we unplugged the floppy drive connector, we've unplugged the power connector, and we unplugged the extra
I still have
12-volt power connector.
fan.
So we've got a couple other things. Now, the fan is plugged right into the motherboard that goes along the back, and it's plugged in right back here. Okay, that's an extra fan connector. Most motherboards have one, if not two or three extra fan connectors that manage the fans. You can go ahead and unplug that one as well. It's kind of tight because it's zip tied in there. So that is so that the motherboard can manage the fan.
Did
There are a
you
lot
use
of
it tight in there?
no, I didn't use it. There's a lot of motherboard. There's not a lot of other kinds of fans that can plug right into one of these 12-volt connectors here. But it's better if you have one on your motherboard because then the motherboard knows whether the fan is running or not. And if you plug it into a different power, it won't know. Okay, so there's three other wires plugged into this motherboard, and these three wires are the ones that people, I shouldn't say students, have the most problem with connecting when they put in a new motherboard in their computer. Okay? I realize what we're going to do today, taking this motherboard out, putting it back in, it's all it takes to replace a motherboard in your computer. But what we've got here in the middle, and I'm going to point to the middle ones first, are our USB connectors. And there's one that's plugged in, and there's one that's not. But there's two yellow USB connectors. And by the way, on every USB connectors, they take two USB. That's two USBs that plug into each one. They come in pairs. This particular plug is wonderful because as you unplug that middle one, it's all one plug. You guys can unplug that one. It's all one plug. The white cases that we have, those are 9 different wires. And you have to plug each one of those wires on those, and it is a pain to get the lines. Okay? So this is what runs that front USB on the front of your case. It plugs into there, and then it runs to the front of your case, and that's how those front USBs plug in. My computer at home has another one that goes to the top of the case. You can plug in stuff on the top of your case. You could also run those to a panel on the back of your case, add more USBs in the back of your case. Okay, the one at the far back, the one back here, it's down here by the PCI connector, is your sound. It's what runs the front panel sound that gives you headphone and mic. And that one, you can go ahead and unplug that one. And I want you to hold it up next to your USB. And if you look at them, they're very similar.
Oh, they're just missing.
Okay? They have a different pin blocked out. If you put the wrong one on the wrong one, you will ruin the motherboard. Other than that, they're exactly the same size. If I hold these up to these next to you, they're exactly the same size except for a different pin out.
Wait, how could you?
So, oh, believe me, student, yes, exactly. That's why you ruin the
You
motherboard.
forced
You just
it?
crushed it in. I've had many students do that. Same thing that happened with the IDE connectors. When you look at the IDE connector, see how that one pin is blocked out? If you flip it the other way, I have more than one student smash it in. You can actually smash it all the way out the back of the motherboard. Right? Because it's just solder holding it in on the other side. There's nothing solid back here. This is a piece of solder. That wire goes through a hole and is soldered on. If I push hard enough, I can pop the solder out and the wire goes right through the back of the motherboard. Okay? So when you go and put these in, which we're not going to have time to do today, we're going to do it next block, you really have to look and say, okay, I think this is blah, because it doesn't say on there. Right? Nowhere does it say on there, audio connector. So you got to look and say, okay, that's the one with that block pinned out. And you're going to line it up right and make sure you put it in right. The last connector is the one that everyone has problems with. It's right here. It's called the front panel connectors.
Oh my god.
Okay? And when you pull that off, you've got
Where is that?
right here in the front. It's the last one. And what you've got is a huge number because these are always different on every other motherboard. Now I've got 8 different connectors, 4 sets. And they say on the plug, reset SW for reset switch. That's what means the reset button work. HDD LED, that's a hard drive light. Power SW, that's a power switch. And power LED, if you get the wrong one on, it don't working. Okay? That's what makes these lights and these buttons work. So when we put it back on, there's no way to just look at this and see how you do it. You have to look at the manual. Plug it in. You have to.
Oh, so I've already.
That's okay, we're going to look at the manual. We're going to plug it back in with the manual, and I'll put it back in. But you can't look at that and see how to do it. Now everything's unplugged from our motherboard, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's plugged in. There are 6 screws holding it in your case. Please take out your 6 screws carefully, remove your motherboard, and set it on the black section of your table carefully.
Wait, what screw? Like these in
There's
this
one
one?
right there. That is not a screwdriver.
It's not, well, it is. It's more of a shiv than a screwdriver. You lost your screwdriver?
Someone's still in this place.
It's sitting right here in my hand.
You do that all the time. You lock my things.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that before. So there's 6 screws on this one because it's a mini ATX motherboard. This is not a full-size ATX. If it was a full-size ATX, it'd go to the bottom of this case because this case is made for a full-size ATX. Now the sound Max is hearing right now is the sound of one of the standoffs. Standoff is a word you need to know. Standoff. The standoff is the little screw that holds it off the motherboard, because if this was sitting on the motherboard, that's okay, go to the next one. If it was sitting on the motherboard, this computer would be ruined, right? On the case. That's okay, we're going to show you how to do it. Okay? So some of these, when you hear that popping sound, it's unscrewed from the case instead of the motherboard. This sound right here. It's unscrewed, so I'm going to be able to lift it up once I have the other ones done as I'm unscrewing it, and I'm just unscrewing it out of the motherboard. And this is out of the case. And this is what you end up with when you get that out, if you had that problem, and half of us had that problem last time. 2 of these standoffs, if I said standoffs last time, it's called a standoff, that holds it off of the case, that holds the motherboard off the case, are stuck on here. And that's why I have this right here. This holds a standoff screw.
So when you hear that pop, you should see.
Yes. No, you're going to have to pull on the motherboard and unscrew it at the same time to get it off. And then we're going to go like I'm doing right now. If you look at me, I'm holding on the standoff and unscrewing it so this comes off. And I have to do that on both those if you're unlucky enough to be one of us that had our standoff stuck onto the motherboard.
I'm pretty sure this one's a standoff too.
So keep your screws separate from other case screws because they're not the same. When you're done, you should have a nice motherboard all by itself. Did everybody get anybody else not get their motherboard out? And then we're going to have to screw the standoffs back into the case. And they go where it says A if your motherboard's out.
How are you guys doing the one by the minute?
That one is mine is it's a thing you have to clean it out.
Yeah, we already talked about that one. That was the second 12-volt power connector. There should be nothing plugged in when you go to pull your motherboard out, or it's really a lot harder to pull it out than it should be. Okay? And you left your floppy drive all the way for just a little bit of kind of sort of attention. And you don't want to do what Max just did. You don't want to lay your motherboard on this metal. The whole point of the standoffs is to keep it off the metal. Okay? So now Max is going to set it down on a nice black table. And we also don't want to touch it, I'm sorry if I didn't say this, by anything but the CPU cooling fan. Okay? Yeah, remember how many volts could Max have just displaced into his motherboard? 2,999 without knowing it, right?
Your other hand, right?
So use your hand on the CPU cooling fan, and then Max is going to go like this. You only have, you have 2 stuck. So you're going to take and hold this on there. Screw it.
I need that one.
And then
I was looking in there.
Okay, is your clock wrong?
I don't know why.
Oh, it says
Your
10
computer
and
says
3.
10 and 3 and it says 10 and
That's stuff. That's a picture. How much time do we have left?
1 minute.
1 minute! Holy cannolis! What are we gonna do?
I can't get this off. I have 2 stuff.
We are in trouble right now. Because I want you to put them back in, too.
What?
Well, yeah, we're gonna clean them off and then put them back
Oh,
in.
man.
Who was supposed to be in charge of the time?
You didn't say anyone.
Brighton?
Why is it instantly me?
Yeah, it's always your fault.
So we just set it back in here?
No, don't set it back in there because we're gonna clean them out before we set it back in there.
What should we
So
do
just
with
leave
them?
them out?
Yes.
I don't know.
We're gonna clean them out. We're gonna put them back.
Do you have somewhere I can lay this? Because you said
Set it down on the black table. That's what I said. So it's oh man.
I'm not gonna get a good spot on my lunch table.
No, you go. I said I'm gonna clean them off and put them back in.
Okay. Sorry, I made more work for you, bro.
Good job. Good job. I'm frozen.